In late 1969, a rumor began circulating that Paul McCartney had died in a car accident and had been replaced as a Beatle by a lookalike. The rumor persisted due to a collection of speculative and circumstantial evidence discovered by Beatles fans and followers. These clues were found in the band's album art, their song lyrics, and even in claims that McCartney's appearance had changed, possibly resulting from an imposter's plastic surgery. We'll take a look at some of this evidence in this video. On September 17, 1969, Tim Harper, editor of the student newspaper of Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa, the Drake Times-Delphic, published an article titled, "Is Beatle Paul McCartney Dead?" The article addressed a rumor being circulated on campus that cited clues from recent Beatles albums proving that Paul McCartney was dead. According to music journalist Merrill Noden, Harper's student newspaper article was the very first published article on the Paul is dead theory. That conspiracy theory exploded and spread like a pop culture wildfire, credited to a radio listener that called into Russ Gibbs' WKNR Sunday show in Detroit on October 12, 1969. The caller claimed to have discovered that if you play the Beatles' White Album track Revolution 9 backwards, you could hear a hidden message. That message, delivered in spoken words, said, "Turn me on, dead man." A supposed reference to Paul McCartney who had, he claimed, died 2 years earlier and been replaced by a lookalike. Soon, dozens of alleged clues to Paul McCartney's death had been identified by fans and followers. Speculation surrounding Paul's demise soon appeared in many national magazines and in other media. On October 22, 1969, the Paul is dead rumor became an international news story. The theory gained traction after a number of radio DJs began discussing it on air. Followers of the Paul is dead theory soon found dozens of clues on later Beatles work. Here are a few of the most popular. The front cover is said to depict Paul's funeral with the Beatles mourning standing over the grave. Laid upon the gravesite is Paul's left-handed bass guitar. The strings of the instrument are made of sticks, but there are only 3 sticks rather than 4. With a little imagination, you can see that the yellow flowers spell out Paul. Or, looked at another way, the flowers form the letter P. Paul is wearing a patch with the letters OPD, interpreted as officially pronounced dead. It was reported that this phrase is the equivalent of dead on arrival in British police jargon. Several songs have references to a tragic accident. Good Morning opens with the line, "Nothing to do to save his life, call his wife in." And in A Day in the Life, John sings ominously of a car crash. He blew his mind out in a car. He hadn't noticed that the lights had changed. A crowd of people stood and stared. They'd seen his face before. Nobody was really sure if he was from the House of Lords. On the original LP, the song lyrics are printed on the back cover over a picture of the Beatles. Unlike the rest of the Beatles, Paul has his back turned to the camera. The 3 black buttons on the back of his coat representing the mourning of the other Beatles. With all the surreal, psychedelic imagery on this album and the movie, true believers delve deep to find more clues from the Beatles about Paul's death. Right from the start, the title song announced, "The magical mystery tour is dying to take you away." On the cover, the Beatles are dressed in silly, animal-like costumes. 3 are in white costumes, 1 is in black. The black costume Beatle is dressed as a walrus. Black, of course, is a symbol of death. The album included a song by John Lennon called "I Am the Walrus." Later on, a song called "Glass Onion" from the White Album, John sings, "I told you about the walrus and me, man. We are as close as can be, man. Well, here's another clue for you all. the walrus was Paul. The Magical Mystery Tour album was packaged with a 24-page booklet featuring still pictures from the movie. Many of the photos, according to theorists, include clues. For example, on page 25, the Beatles are all wearing carnations. But while the rest of the Beatles have red flowers, Paul's carnation is black. Black carnations are quite rare and avoided mostly because they symbolize mourning and death. On the White Album poster, there's a picture of Paul with his eyes closed and his head tipped backwards into a bathtub. I mentioned earlier John's line from Glass Onion referencing the walrus is Paul. The song also mentions looking through a glass onion, the British reference to a coffin with a glass top. In John Lennon's song I'm So Tired, there's a line near the end which is indistinguishable until it's played backwards. In reverse, you supposedly hear John saying, "Paul is dead, man. Miss him, miss him." And in Ringo's song, Don't Pass Me By, Ringo sings the lines, "You were in a car crash and you lost your hair." Abbey Road was the last album recorded by the Beatles, considered a masterpiece, the culmination of their trend-setting progression. And this work did not disappoint the clue hunters, starting with the album's cover, which was chock full of morbid Maca evidence. Many would argue that of the thousands of photos taken of the Beatles over their career, this one photo could be their most iconic, frozen in time, capturing the four lads as they traverse the crosswalk at Abbey Road in orderly succession. John at the helm in his long hair and beard, all in white. Some claimed he was the Jesus symbol. Ringo behind John in black in the role of the Undertaker. Paul is third in line. He is the only Beatle with his eyes closed and the only Beatle without shoes. Clue seekers point out that in many countries, people are buried shoeless. Paul is the only Beatle out of step with the others. The only Beatle shown smoking, and left-handed Paul holds his cigarette in his right hand. Common slang in England for a cigarette was a coffin nail. Coincidence? I think not. George, bringing up the rear, wears a gravedigger's outfit. I don't know. That might be a stretch. Behind the Beatles on the left side of the street is a Volkswagen Beetle. Get it? Beetle, Beetle. The license plate on the Beetle reads 28 if, suggesting that Paul would have been 28 if he were still alive. While actually, Paul would have been 27 when Abbey Road was released. But who's counting? One of the best known Paul is Dead audio clues comes at the end of Strawberry Fields Forever. This song was not included on any Beatles albums originally, but rather it was released with Penny Lane as a two-sided single. As the song is fading out for the second time, John appears to mumble, "I buried Paul." Many suggest the Beatles caught on to this crazy Paul is Dead hysteria and decided to have some fun with it, adding clues to their work for the conspiracy sleuths to find. To the best of my knowledge, they never confessed to this, so we may never know what part the Beatles may have played in exacerbating the hoax.
In the toward the end of the '60s, is that when the rumors about you being dead surfaced? Do you remember that? Do you remember how that started? What were your feelings about that?
What happened? Yeah, my feelings. What happened was we did a cover for a record called Abbey Road, and we. See, even the cover gets applause. And the idea was to walk across the crossing, and I showed up that day with sandals, flip-flops, and so it was so hot that I kicked them off and walked across barefooted. So this started some rumor that because he was barefooted, he's dead. I couldn't see the connection myself.
No, I don't. It seems like a long, slow, difficult death. Being barefooted will kill you.
Scorched feet.
And how do you manage something like that? Because it was a global rumor.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I just laughed at it and knew it was just because of the fame and the craziness. It was an American DJ, so you guys are to blame.
Yeah.
Not you personally, but no, the thing is, you know, I just laughed it off, but it was a little bit strange because people did start looking at me like,
right.
Is it him? Yeah. Or a very good double?
Well, that was the idea. That was the other part of it, that there was a guy who looked like you taking your place.
No, well, this is him.
Yeah. Or is it?
The conspiracy theory that Paul McCartney is dead is one of the most famous and enduring pop culture conspiracy theories in history. Perhaps the most compelling evidence that the Paul is dead theory is a hoax are the songs. I guess you could find a lookalike, maybe even a vocalist to imitate Paul, though in my mind both are unlikely. But those songs. Paul's songs that were written after his supposed death in a car wreck in November of 1966. No one on earth other than Paul McCartney could have created those masterpieces. What do you think? Is today's Paul McCartney an imposter? Has Paul McCartney really been dead since November of 1966? Probably not. But leave a comment below. And be sure to like, follow, and share. Thanks for watching.